The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I almost didn't answer. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but something about those 10 digits made my stomach drop. I'd memorized that area code 8 years ago when I decided to forget it forever. Hello? My voice came out steady, but my hand was already shaking. Jamie? Jamie, is that really you? Mom's voice. After 8 years of complete silence, she sounded exactly the same. That breathy way she talked when she wanted something. The fake sweetness that used to make my skin crawl. We need to talk, she said before I could hang up. It's about the house. We're going to lose everything. I sat down hard on my leather couch, the one that cost more than my childhood bedroom furniture combined. Through my floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sparkled below my penthouse apartment. I'd worked 16-hour days for a decade to afford this view. Jamie, are you there? I know this is sudden, but we need $50,000. The bank is foreclosuring next month and $50,000. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's interesting. I know we haven't talked in a while. 8 years, Mom. 8 years of pretending I don't exist. Silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear her breathing, probably calculating her next move. She always was good at strategy when she needed something. Things were complicated back then, she finally whispered. But your family, you're our only hope now. Our only hope. The invisible child who'd been forgotten at school pickup, excluded from family photos, treated like a stranger at my own dinner table. I was suddenly their only hope. I have the money, I said quietly. Her sharp intake of breath told me everything. She'd gambled on this call, but she hadn't actually believed I'd made something of myself. None of them had. You do? Oh, thank God, Jamie, I knew you. But Mom? I cut her off. Why should I save people who spent 18 years acting like I didn't matter? The line went quiet. In that silence, I heard my entire childhood echoing back. Every birthday where I got the leftover cake, every Christmas morning where my gifts were clearly afterthoughts, every family vacation I wasn't invited to because there wasn't enough room. I'd built an empire out of spite. Now they wanted to cash in. I'll think about it, I lied and hung up. But I wasn't thinking about giving them money. I was thinking about something much more satisfying. Revenge. To understand why that phone call felt like a knife in my chest, you need to know what it was like growing up as the forgotten kid in the Morrison family. I was 7 when I realized something was wrong with me. Not medically wrong, emotionally wrong. Like I was missing some essential piece that made other kids lovable to their parents. My older brother Marcus was the golden boy, star athlete, straight A's, the kid who could do no wrong. My younger sister Emma was the baby, the princess who got away with everything because she had Dad wrapped around her tiny fingers. And then there was me, right in the middle, taking up space. I remember the exact moment I understood my place in the family hierarchy. It was Marcus's 10th birthday party. Mom had spent weeks planning this elaborate superhero theme, complete with a rented bounce house and custom cake. The whole neighborhood was there. When it came time for the family photo, I ran over to squeeze between my parents like I always did, but Dad's hand landed on my shoulder, not gentle, firm, guiding me backward. Just the birthday boy today, kiddo, he said, not even looking at me. I stood behind the photographer, watching my family pose perfectly without me. Mom's hands on Marcus's shoulders, Dad beaming with pride, Emma giggling in her frilly dress. The photographer never asked where I was. My parents never called me over. I might as well have been invisible. That became the pattern. School events where they forgot to pick me up, and I'd sit on the curb until a teacher called home. Christmas mornings where Marcus and Emma tore through piles of presents while I got a book and some socks. Family vacations where they'd suddenly realized they'd only booked a hotel room for 4, and I'd end up sleeping on a cot they dragged in from the hallway. We didn't forget you, Mom would always say when I'd point out being left behind. Don't be so dramatic, Jamie. But they did forget me, constantly. The worst part wasn't the neglect. It was watching how different they were with Marcus and Emma. Dad would spend hours throwing baseball with Marcus in the backyard. Mom would braid Emma's hair every morning before school, talking about clothes and boys and dreams. With me, conversations were functional. Did you do your homework? Clean your room. Take out the trash. I started staying at the library after school, partly because no one was ever home to notice if I was late, but mostly because the librarian, Mrs. Chen, always remembered my name. She'd save new books she thought I'd like. She'd ask about my day like the answer actually mattered. Mrs. Chen saw me in a way my family never did. By high school, I'd learned to be invisible on purpose. It hurt less than trying to fight for attention I'd never get. I worked. Part-time jobs, saved every penny, and made plans for the day I could leave for good. The day I graduated, Marcus was starting his junior year of college, paid for entirely by my parents, of course. Emma was 15 and already talking about which car she wanted for her 16th birthday. I had $1,700 in a savings account and an acceptance letter to a state school 3 hours away. "You're really leaving?" Mom asked when I loaded my beat-up Honda with everything I owned. She seemed genuinely surprised, like she'd never considered that the kid they ignored might eventually stop trying to be noticed. "Yeah, Mom, I'm really leaving." I hugged them goodbye, quick, awkward embraces that felt like handshakes between strangers. Then I drove away from the only home I'd ever known, promising myself I'd never beg for their love again. I kept that promise for 8 years. Until that phone call changed everything. Leaving home with $1,700 and a car that barely started should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like I could finally breathe. College was different. Nobody knew I was the forgotten Morrison kid. To my roommates and classmates, I was just Jamie, someone worth getting to know. For the first time in my life, people chose to spend time with me because they actually enjoyed my company. I worked 3 jobs to pay for school. Mornings at a coffee shop, afternoons tutoring kids in math, weekends doing freelance graphic design on a laptop I'd bought with my first paycheck. While Marcus was pledging a fraternity on my parents' dime, I was learning what it felt like to earn everything myself. The work was exhausting, but it was also intoxicating. Every dollar I made, every good grade I earned, every friendship I built, it all belonged to me. No one could take credit for my achievements or make me feel like I didn't deserve them. I studied business and computer science, figuring those were skills that would always be valuable. My professors noticed my work ethic. One of them, Dr. Martinez, pulled me aside after class junior year. "You've got something special, Jamie," she said. "That drive, that focus, it's rare. Don't let anyone convince you to settle for less than you're capable of." She became my first real mentor. Through her connections, I landed an internship at a tech startup the summer before senior year. The company was small, scrappy, and absolutely chaotic. I loved every minute of it. When they offered me a full-time position after graduation, I didn't hesitate. The salary was modest, but the equity package had potential. More importantly, they saw leadership qualities in me that my own family had never recognized. I threw myself into the work. 18-hour days became normal. While my college friends were out partying and dating, I was building something. The startup was developing software for small businesses, tools to help them manage inventory, track sales, connect with customers. We were solving real problems for real people, and I was good at it. Really good. 3 years in, our biggest competitor tried to buy us out. The founders were tempted, but I convinced them we could build something bigger on our own. I'd been promoted to head of product development by then, and my vision for the company's future was bold. "Trust me," I told them. "Give me 2 more years." Those 2 years nearly killed me. I lived in the office more than my apartment. I survived on coffee and determination, watching our user base grow from thousands to hundreds of thousands. The software I'd helped design was revolutionizing how small businesses operated. When we finally went public, my equity was worth more money than I'd ever imagined possible. The day the stock price closed, I sat in my new apartment, the penthouse I'd just bought with cash, and realized something profound. I'd spent 10 years building a life my family couldn't diminish or ignore. I was successful, respected, and financially independent, and I'd done it all without them. The loneliness hit me sometimes, especially during holidays. I'd see social media posts of families gathered around dinner tables, and I'd wonder what it would have been like to have parents who were proud of my achievements, to have siblings who wanted to celebrate my victories with me. But I'd also learned something powerful about chosen family. My co-workers had become my closest friends. Dr. Martinez still called to check on me. The barista at my favorite coffee shop knew my order and always asked about my latest projects. These people saw value in me that my biological family had missed entirely. I was thinking about all of this when my phone buzzed with social media notifications. Marcus had tagged the family in photos from Emma's college graduation party, the same elaborate celebration style I remembered from our childhood, but now I was watching from the outside by choice. They looked happy, successful in their own conventional way. Marcus had followed Dad into insurance sales, Emma was engaged to her college boyfriend and planning a wedding that was already being documented in excruciating detail online. Their posts painted a picture of the perfect American family, loving parents, accomplished children, bright futures ahead. They just never mentioned the child they'd written out of the story. I was scrolling through these updates, feeling that familiar ache of being excluded, and my phone rang. That call that would change everything was still 3 months away. But looking at those photos, I realized something that would matter when that moment came. I didn't need them anymore. I'd built something they couldn't take away. The question was, what would I do with that power? After Mom's desperate phone call, I couldn't sleep. $50,000. Foreclosure. Their only hope. Something didn't add up. I'd been following their social media from a distance for years, not out of longing, but more like watching a car crash in slow motion. As far as I could tell from their posts, everything was perfect. Dad's insurance business was thriving. Marcus had just bought a new truck. Emma's engagement photos looked like they'd cost more than most people's weddings. But now they were facing foreclosure? I opened my laptop and started digging. Social media investigation isn't stalking when it's your own family, right? At least that's what I told myself as I scrolled back through 2 years of posts, looking for clues I'd missed. The first red flag was Emma's engagement announcement from 6 months ago. The ring was massive, probably worth more than most people's cars. But when I looked closer at the photos, something was off. The backgrounds kept changing. Professional shots at a fancy restaurant, then casual selfies in what looked like a cheap apartment. Then I found Marcus's posts from his new business venture. He'd left Dad's insurance company to start his own consulting firm. The office photos looked impressive, but reverse image searches revealed he was renting conference rooms by the hour for photo ops. Dad's business posts became less frequent after last Christmas. Where he used to share client success stories and company updates weekly, there were suddenly long gaps. When he did post, it was generic motivational quotes instead of actual business content. But it was Mom's posts that really told the story. She'd always been the family documentarian, posting every family dinner, every milestone, every moment she could. Spin into social media gold, but starting 8 months ago, the posts became strategic. Carefully cropped photos that showed expensive items but never the full room. Restaurant check-ins that were always during happy hour, never prime dinner time. She was maintaining the illusion of prosperity while cutting every corner possible. I needed more information, so I reached out to Sarah Kim, a mutual friend from high school who still lived in our hometown. Sarah worked at the bank, not the same one holding my parents' mortgage, but small towns talk. "Oh my God, Jamie Morrison, I heard you done really well for yourself," Sarah said when she called me back. "Your family must be so proud." I almost laughed. "Actually, Sarah, that's kind of why I'm calling. I'm worried about them. Have you heard anything about financial troubles?" The pause that followed told me everything. "I probably shouldn't say anything," she said carefully. "But since your family, your dad's business has been struggling for over a year. Lost some major commercial accounts to bigger firms. And Marcus, well, his consulting thing never really took off. Emma's wedding planning business folded after 3 months." Wedding planning business? This was news to me. She started it right after graduation, but she had no experience and kept underbidding jobs, lost money on every event. Your parents had to bail her out twice before she finally gave up. The picture was becoming clearer. Dad's business failing, Marcus's entrepreneurial dreams crashing, Emma's naive business venture bleeding money, and my parents too proud to downsize their lifestyle, borrowing against the house to maintain appearances. "The foreclosure notice went up last week," Sarah added quietly. "I'm sorry, Jamie. I thought you knew." After we hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen. My family, the people who'd made me feel worthless my entire childhood, had spectacularly failed at everything they'd tried to build without me. Marcus, the golden boy who could do no wrong, couldn't hold down a job. Emma, the princess who got everything handed to her, had never learned how to work for anything. And my parents, who'd invested everything in their successful children, were facing the consequences of their favoritism. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. The invisible child they'd ignored was now worth more than all of them combined. The kid who'd been forgotten at school pickup had built an empire. The teenager who'd left home with $1,700 now had enough money to solve their problems without breaking a sweat. But here's what really got to me. Even in their desperation, even when they needed me more than they'd ever needed anyone, Mom hadn't apologized for the years of neglect. She hadn't acknowledged the pain they'd caused. She'd just assumed that blood was thicker than water, and I'd come running to save them. Like I owed them something, like they deserved my help just because we shared DNA. I closed my laptop and walked to my kitchen, pouring myself a glass of wine that cost more than my family's monthly grocery budget used to be. Through my windows, the city stretched out below me, a kingdom I'd built through sheer determination and refusal to accept the limitations they'd tried to place on me. They needed me now. After 30 years of making me feel invisible, I was suddenly the most important person in their world. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I had some ideas, and none of them involved writing a check. I waited 3 days before calling Mom back. 3 days to let their desperation marinate, to let them wonder if their only hope was going, to save them or leave them hanging. When I finally called, she answered on the first ring. "Jamie, oh thank God, I was starting to worry you'd changed your mind." "I haven't made up my mind about anything yet," I said, "but I want to understand the situation better. Can we meet for coffee this weekend?" The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice had that careful quality I remembered from childhood, the tone she used when she was trying to manage my expectations. "Of course we can meet. But Jamie, time is really important here. The foreclosure proceedings start in 3 weeks. Then we better not waste any more time, should we?" I drove back to my hometown that Saturday morning, taking the scenic route past the neighborhoods where I delivered newspapers as a kid, past the high school where I'd eaten lunch alone most days, past the library where Mrs. Chen had made me feel like I mattered. Nothing had changed much. Same strip malls, same chain restaurants, same suffocating sense of small-town expectations that I'd been so desperate to escape. Mom had chosen a coffee shop in the fancy part of town, the part where she still wanted people to see her, still wanted to maintain appearances. She was already waiting when I arrived, checking her phone nervously. She looked older than I'd expected, more fragile. The polished image from her social media posts didn't hold up in person. Her clothes were expensive but worn, her manicure was chipped, and there were stress lines around her eyes that no filter could hide. "You look wonderful," she said, standing to hug me. "Success really suits you." The hug was awkward, like embracing a stranger, which I realized she basically was. "So," I said, settling into my chair, "tell me exactly what happened." What followed was a masterclass in deflection and blame shifting. According to Mom, Dad's business troubles were because of unfair competition from bigger firms. Marcus's consulting venture failed because his clients didn't appreciate his innovative approaches. Emma's wedding planning business collapsed because her clients were unreasonable and demanding. Nothing was ever their fault. There was always an external reason, always someone else to blame. "But you can fix this," Mom finished, reaching across the table to touch my hand. 50,000 would cover the back payments and give us time to get back on our feet. "Get back on your feet how?" I asked. "What's the plan?" She blinked at me like I'd asked her to solve calculus. "Well, your father will rebuild his client base. Marcus is exploring some new opportunities. Emma's thinking about real estate." Empty words, wishful thinking, the same pattern of avoiding responsibility that had defined their lives for years. "What about acknowledging what happened between us?" I asked quietly. "What about the 18 years where you treated me like I didn't exist?" Mom's expression shifted, and for a moment I saw something that looked like genuine discomfort. But then the mask slipped back into place. "Oh, Jamie, you always were so sensitive. We may not have been perfect parents, but we did our best. And look how well you turned out. Maybe a little independence was exactly what you needed. She was rewriting history in real time, turning years of emotional neglect into some kind of tough love parenting strategy that had been for my own good. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled. I'd like to meet with Marcus and Emma too, I said, before I make any decisions. The meetings that followed were even worse. Marcus suggested we grab beers at the sports bar, where he'd been a local hero in high school. He spent 20 minutes talking about his glory days on the football team before getting to his current situation. This consulting thing is just hitting some speed bumps, he said, not meeting my eyes. I've got some major contracts in the pipeline. I just need a few months to close them. When I asked for specifics about these contracts, he got defensive. When I mentioned our childhood, he acted confused. Come on, Jamie, we were kids. You can't hold grudges about kid stuff forever. Family's family, right? Emma met me for lunch at the country club, where she was still somehow a member despite being broke. She spent the entire meal talking about her wedding plans, the venue she'd booked, the dress she'd ordered, the honeymoon she was planning. I know the timing isn't ideal, she said when I finally asked about the family's financial situation. But Jason and I can't postpone our wedding. We've already sent save the dates. How are you paying for all this if money's so tight? She looked at me like I'd asked something incredibly rude. Well, that's what the loan is for, part of it anyway. Daddy always said he'd pay for my wedding. Even facing foreclosure, even asking me for money to save their house, she still expected her fairy tale wedding to be funded by parents who couldn't make their mortgage payments. The entitlement was breathtaking. But what really got to me was the complete absence of apology, of acknowledgement, of any recognition that they'd treated me badly. In their minds, the past was just water under the bridge. Family disagreements that didn't matter now that they needed something from me. Driving home that night, I realized something important. They hadn't changed at all. They were still the same people who'd made me feel worthless for 18 years. They were just desperate enough now to pretend I mattered. But pretending wasn't the same as meaning it. And I was done accepting pretend love from people who'd never given me the real thing. It was time to teach them what consequences actually looked like. I called a family meeting for the following Sunday. Not a request, a demand. If they wanted my money, they'd play by my rules for once. Come to the house at 2 o'clock, I told Mom. All of you. Marcus, Emma, you, and Dad. We're going to settle this once and for all. I arrived at my childhood home 15 minutes early, parking across the street so I could observe before going in. The house looked exactly the same from the outside. Same beige siding, same overgrown hedges, same crooked mailbox that Dad had never bothered to fix. But now I knew what the exterior was hiding. The foreclosure notice was tucked discreetly behind the storm door, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. When I walked up to the front porch, memories flooded back. How many times had I stood here as a kid, fumbling for my key because no one was home to let me in? How many times had I sat on these steps waiting for someone to remember they were supposed to pick me up from school? Mom answered the door with that nervous smile she'd been wearing all week. Jamie, you're early. Come in, come in. The living room was exactly as I remembered it, but smaller somehow. The family photos still lined the mantel. Graduations, Christmas mornings, vacation snapshots. I moved closer to look at them, confirming what I already knew. I wasn't in a single one. Dad was sitting in his recliner, looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. Marcus occupied the couch, scrolling through his phone like this was just another inconvenience in his day. Emma perched on the edge of the love seat, checking her reflection in a compact mirror. Nobody stood up when I entered. Nobody seemed particularly happy to see me. Perfect. I remained standing, positioning myself in front of the fireplace where I had a clear view of all of them. From my briefcase, I pulled out a folder thick with printouts. Before we talk about money, I said, I want to share some things I've discovered about your situation. I started laying out the evidence like a prosecutor presenting a case. Bank records I'd obtained through some creative research. Social media posts that contradicted their claims about business success. Screenshots of Marcus's consulting firm that was just a P.O. box and a website template. Your business didn't fail because of unfair competition, Dad. It failed because you stopped working. You've spent more time at the golf course this year than at the office. Dad's face reddened, but he didn't deny it. And Marcus, your consulting venture was never real. You registered a business name and printed some cards, but you never had a single client. That's not... Marcus started to protest, but I cut him off. Emma, your wedding planning business didn't fail because of difficult clients. It failed because you took deposits for weddings you couldn't afford to execute, then spent the money on your own engagement party. The silence in the room was deafening. But here's what really interests me, I continued, pulling out the family photos from the mantel. This is 30 years of family history, and I'm not in a single picture, not one. I spread the photos across the coffee table like evidence exhibits. Birthday parties where you literally moved me out of frame. Christmas mornings where you took the group shot while I was in the bathroom. Graduation photos where I was somehow always conveniently helping with something else. Mom's voice came out as a whisper. Jamie, we never meant... You never meant to what? Make me feel invisible? Because that's exactly what you did. For 18 years, you made it clear that I didn't belong in this family. I pulled out my phone and showed them a bank statement. I can transfer $50,000 right now. I can save your house, cover Emma's wedding, bail out Marcus's fake business. I have enough money to solve all your problems. Their faces lit up with hope. But I'm not going to do that. The hope died instantly. At least not unconditionally. If you want my help, here's what's going to happen. First, you're going to acknowledge, publicly and specifically, how you treated me. Facebook posts, not private conversations. You're going to tell everyone exactly what kind of parents and siblings you were to me. Jamie, that's not fair, Emma started. Second, I continued, ignoring her protest. You're going to make genuine changes. Dad, you're going to sell this house and downsize to something you can actually afford. Marcus, you're going to get a real job and stop pretending to be an entrepreneur. Emma, you're going to have a wedding you can pay for yourself, not a fantasy funded by borrowed money. You can't dictate our lives, Marcus said, standing up. We're not children. No, you're not children. You're grown adults who've never learned to face consequences. But if you want so, and my money, you'll follow my conditions. And if we don't? Dad asked quietly. I looked around the room one last time. At the photos that excluded me, at the furniture I was never allowed to sit on as a kid, at the family that had never made room for me. Then you'll lose the house. Emma will have to call off her wedding. Marcus will have to explain to everyone why his business was fake, and you'll all have to live with the consequences of your choices. I packed up my evidence and headed toward the door. You have 24 hours to decide. Call me when you're ready to meet my terms. Behind me, the room erupted in angry voices. Blame and accusations flying in every direction. Emma was crying, Marcus was shouting, Mom was trying to play peacemaker while Dad sat in stunned silence. It was chaos. It was exactly what they deserved. And for the first time in 30 years, I was walking away from that house with my head held high. They called the next morning, not Mom this time, Dad. We need to talk, he said, his voice rough like he hadn't slept. Can you come back to the house? No, I said simply. If you want to discuss my terms, we'll meet somewhere public. The coffee shop where Mom and I met last week, 1 hour. When I arrived, all 4 of them were already there, huddled around a corner table like they were plotting something, which, knowing my family, they probably were. I sat down across from them and waited. Dad cleared his throat. We've talked about your conditions. Some of them are reasonable, others are asking too much. I'm not negotiating, I said. These aren't conditions for a business deal. These are the terms for earning my forgiveness and my help. The Facebook posts, Emma said, her voice small. People will think we're terrible parents. You were terrible parents, to me. But our friends, our neighbors, Mom started, will know the truth. For once. Marcus leaned forward, trying his old charm offensive. Look, Jamie, we get that you felt left out sometimes. But asking us to humiliate ourselves publicly, forcing Dad to sell the house he's lived in for 30 years, that's not justice. That's revenge. You're right, I said. It is revenge. But it's also accountability. For 30 years, you've avoided consequences for how you treated me. You've never had to face what your favoritism and neglect did to a child. You've never had to explain to anyone why your family photos only show 3 kids instead of 4. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to help you, but I'm going to do it my way. Dad perked up. You'll give us the $50,000? No. I'm going to do something better. I'm going to pay off your mortgage entirely. The collective gasp around the table was audible. A full mortgage payoff was probably 3 times what they'd asked for. But, I continued, the house gets transferred into a trust. You can live there for the rest of your lives, but you can't sell it, borrow against it, or use it as collateral for more bad decisions. When you both pass away, it goes to charity. That's not, Marcus started. I'm also setting up college funds for any grandchildren you might have someday. Kids shouldn't suffer because their parents are financial disasters. And Emma's wedding? Mom asked tentatively. I'll pay for a reasonable ceremony, $5,000, which is more than most people spend on their entire wedding. If she wants something more elaborate, she can figure out how to pay for it herself. Emma's face crumpled. But we already put depot. Sits down on, then you made poor financial decisions and you'll have to deal with the consequences. Welcome to adulthood. I turned to Marcus. As for you, I'm not funding any more entrepreneurial fantasies, but I'll give you exactly one chance to prove you can hold down a real job. If you can stay employed for 2 full years without getting fired or quitting, I'll consider investing in a legitimate business venture you might propose. Not before. What about the Facebook posts? Dad asked quietly. Still happening. All of you are going to publicly acknowledge how you treated me. Not because I'm forcing you to, but because it's the right thing to do. Because admitting your mistakes is the first step toward becoming better people. And if we don't agree to the posts? Mom asked. I stood up, shouldering my purse. Then you get nothing. Your house gets foreclosed on. Emma has to explain to her fiancé why there's no wedding. Marcus keeps pretending his fake business is real until everyone figures it out. And I go back to my life knowing I offered you more grace than you ever offered me. I paused at their table one more time. The money will be transferred by Friday, whether you make the posts or not. Consider it my final gift to a family that never appreciated what they had. But if you want a relationship with me going forward, if you want to be part of my life as I build a real family of my own, then you'll do what I asked. Real family? Emma asked. What do you mean? For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I smiled genuinely. I mean the people who've chosen to love me for who I am, not what I can do for them. The people who celebrated my successes and supported me through failures. The people who never made me feel invisible. I looked around the table one last time. You could have been those people. For 30 years you had the chance to be those people. Instead, you taught me that DNA doesn't make a family. Love does. And I've found that love elsewhere. Jamie, wait. Mom called as I headed for the door. The posts go up by Sunday, or this is the last conversation we ever have, I said without turning around. Your choice. I walked out of that coffee shop feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd gotten revenge, though there was satisfaction in that, but because I'd finally set boundaries that protected my own self-worth. They could take my money and learn nothing from it. They could continue being the same selfish, entitled people they'd always been. But they'd have to do it without my participation. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. The Facebook posts went up Sunday night. Not all at once. They trickled in over the course of several hours, each one more reluctant than the last. Mom posted first, a carefully worded apology that managed to acknowledge wrongdoing while still making excuses. Dad's was shorter, more direct, and surprisingly honest about his failures as a father. Marcus waited until almost midnight to post his, and Emma's didn't appear until the following Tuesday. Both were grudging admissions that felt more like homework assignments than genuine apologies. But they did it. All of them. Publicly acknowledging what I'd known privately for 30 years, that they'd failed me as a family. The comments on their posts were interesting. Old family friends expressing shock and confusion, high school classmates asking questions that had apparently never occurred to them before. A few people defended my family, but most of the responses were supportive of me. Mrs. Chen, my old librarian, commented on every single post. Jamie was always a Remarkable child who deserved better. I screenshot her comments and saved them in a folder on my phone labeled validation. But here's the thing about getting the acknowledgement you've wanted your whole life. It doesn't feel as satisfying as you think it will. The posts were public vindication, proof that I hadn't imagined or exaggerated the neglect. But they didn't erase 30 years of damage, and they didn't magically transform my family into the people I'd needed them to be. What they did do was close a chapter. The desperate, hopeful part of me that had spent decades wondering if maybe I'd been too sensitive, maybe I'd misunderstood their intentions, maybe they'd change if given another chance, that part finally went quiet. I knew exactly who they were now, and more importantly, I knew exactly who I was without them. The real revelation came the night after Emma's post went live. I was having dinner with my chosen family, the people who'd been celebrating my victories and supporting me through challenges for years. There was Marcus, different Marcus, my business partner and best friend, who'd believed in my vision when everyone else thought I was crazy. Sarah, my former colleague, who'd become like a sister to me, complete with the kind of relationship where we could fight and make up without keeping score. David, who I'd been dating for 8 months and who'd listened to this entire family saga without once suggesting I should just forgive and forget. And Dr. Martinez, my former professor and ongoing mentor, who'd driven 2 hours just to have dinner with us because she knew this week had been difficult for me. We were at my favorite restaurant, the one where the staff knew my name and always asked about my latest projects. The conversation was flowing easily. Work updates, travel plans, Sarah's new apartment, David's promotion. Normal stuff. Family stain. So, Dr. Martinez said as we waited for dessert, "How are you feeling about everything that happened this week?" I considered the question seriously. How was I feeling? "Relieved," I said finally. "For the first time in my life, I'm not wondering what they think of me or hoping they'll finally see my worth. I know my worth, and it doesn't depend on their opinion." "That's huge," Sarah said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "I've watched you struggle with this for years." "I keep thinking about this quote I read once," I continued. "Something about how the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It means that relationships we choose and commit to are stronger than relationships we're just born into." Marcus, my Marcus, not the other one, raised his wine glass. "To chosen family." "To chosen family," we all echoed. And sitting there, surrounded by people who'd seen me at my worst and chosen to stick around, people who celebrated my successes without jealousy and supported my dreams without condition, I realized something profound. I hadn't lost a family this week. I'd finally stopped mourning the family I'd never really had. The family I'd built for myself, through years of showing up, being vulnerable, and choosing to love people who chose to love me back, was everything my biological family had never been. These people knew my stories, my dreams, my fears, my terrible jokes, and my weird habits. They'd seen me cry over business failures and dance around my apartment over victories. They knew me, really knew me, and they'd chosen to stay. That night, after everyone had gone home, David helped me clean up the dishes. We'd been taking things slow, both of us cautious about relationships because of past hurts, but watching him navigate this week with me, listening without trying to fix everything, offering support without judgment, giving me space to feel whatever I needed to feel, had shown me something important about who he was. "Thank you," I said as we loaded the dishwasher, "for being patient with all this family drama." "Hey," he said, pulling me into a hug. "Your family doesn't define you. But watching how you handled this situation, setting boundaries while still being generous, protecting yourself while still being kind, that showed me exactly who you are." "And who am I?" "Someone worth choosing," he said simply, "every day." Standing in my kitchen, wrapped in the arms of someone who saw my value without conditions, I finally understood what I'd been searching for my whole life. I'd been looking for people who would choose me, and I'd found them. The Morrison family had taught me an invaluable lesson, just not the one they'd intended. They'd shown me the difference between conditional love and unconditional love, between being tolerated and being treasured, between family by accident and family by choice. And now I knew which one I wanted to spend my life building. It's been exactly 1 year since that phone call changed everything. And I'm writing this from the same penthouse apartment where I first decided to help my family. But everything else has changed. The house transfer went through as promised. My parents are still living there, mortgage-free, though they've had to make significant lifestyle adjustments. Dad actually went back to work, not running his own agency, but working for someone else who could provide the structure and accountability he'd never maintained on his own. Marcus did get a job, though he was fired from the first one after 3 months for showing up late consistently. He's currently working at a car dealership and, according to mutual acquaintances, actually seems to be good at it. Turns out he's a natural salesman when he's selling something real instead of pretending to run a business. Emma had her small wedding. $5,000 bought a lovely ceremony at a local garden center with about 30 guests. Her social media posts showed genuine happiness instead of the performed perfection she used to curate. Sometimes smaller really is better. Do I have a relationship with them now? Sort of. We exchange Christmas cards. Mom texts me on my birthday. Marcus occasionally shares news about his sales awards. Emma sent me a photo when she found out she's pregnant. It's cordial, polite, distant, and that's exactly what it should be. I learned something important this year. Forgiveness doesn't require relationship. I've forgiven them for the childhood they gave me, not because they've earned it, but because carrying that anger was exhausting. But forgiveness also doesn't mean I have to pretend we're close or let them back into my life in ways that would hurt me again. They're still fundamentally the same people they always were. The crisis forced some practical changes, but it didn't create the deep character transformation that would be necessary for us to have a meaningful relationship, and that's okay. I don't need them to change for me to be happy. What has changed dramatically is my chosen family. David and I got engaged 3 months ago. The proposal was perfect, not because it was elaborate or expensive, but because it was so completely us. He surprised me at the coffee shop where we had our first date with Dr. Martinez, both Marcus's, Sarah, and about a dozen other people from our extended chosen family there to celebrate. When I called my parents to tell them about the engagement, Mom's first question was about the guest list for the wedding. Would there be room for family? You are invited, I told her. But you're not planning it, and you're not involved in the decisions. You can come as guests if you'd like to celebrate with us. She agreed, though I could hear the disappointment in her voice that she wouldn't get to play mother of the bride the way she had probably imagined. The wedding is next month. Small ceremony, about 50 people who actually know and care about both of us. Dr. Martinez is walking me down the aisle, not because I don't have a father, but because she's the person who truly believed in me when it mattered most. My business partner Marcus is David's best man. Sarah is my maid of honor. The officiant is a friend from college who's known us both for years. It's going to be exactly what weddings should be, a celebration of love witnessed by people who actually care about your happiness. But here's what I'm most proud of. We're starting a foundation. The Jamie Morrison Foundation for Forgotten Children provides scholarships and mentorship for kids who've been emotionally neglected by their families. We partner with schools to identify children who might be struggling with feeling invisible at home and connect them with resources, support, and most importantly, adults who see their potential. Mrs. Chen is on our board of directors. She's 78 now and still volunteering at the library, still remembering the names of children whose own families forget them. Our first scholarship recipient is a 17-year-old named Alex, whose parents are so focused on their older son's athletic achievements that they've never attended one of Alex's debate tournaments. Sound familiar? Alex wants to study engineering. Full ride to a state school, plus mentorship and summer internship opportunities. When we called to tell Alex about the scholarship, there was a long silence on the phone, then quiet crying. "No one's ever believed in me like this before," Alex whispered. "I know that feeling. And now, because of what my family put me through, I can make sure other kids don't have to carry that way. Get alone. That's the real victory here. Not the revenge, not the money, not even the public acknowledgement I'd craved for so long. The victory is that I broke the cycle. I turned pain into purpose, rejection into resilience, and abandonment into advocacy. My biological family taught me what I didn't want to become. My chosen family showed me what I could become. And now I get to spend the rest of my life building something beautiful from the ashes of something broken. To anyone watching this who's struggling with family rejection, who feels invisible in their own home, who's wondering if they'll ever be enough for the people who should love them unconditionally. You are enough. Right now, exactly as you are. You are enough. You don't have to earn love through achievement. You don't have to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You don't have to accept crumbs of affection from people who should be giving you full meals. Find your people, build your chosen family, and never, ever let anyone make you feel invisible again. Sometimes the family that breaks you teaches you how to build the family that heals you. And that's the most valuable lesson of all. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who took you for granted? How did you find the courage to put yourself first? I'd love to hear your stories.